We're going to debate today my experience of debating Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith here in Indiana around Christian nationalism. I personally think that Christian nationalism is very dangerous. And many people have asked me, what was your experience like when you debated Beckwith? And so I want to talk about that today. With me here is Jocelyn Bear. She will be interviewing me.
Yes,
Jocelyn, you want to say a few words about
yes,
yourself?
yes. Thank you. My name is Jocelyn Bear, and Matthias and I have two important things in common. The first one is this was a few years ago, but I also had the opportunity to participate in a debate with Micah Beckwith. Now, this was a few years ago before he was lieutenant governor, but at the time, he was a board member of the Hamilton East Public Library, and he spearheaded an initiative to hide young adult books in the library that he found objectionable. Well, I was a Fisher city councilor at the time, so I had the opportunity to debate him as well. So, yes, I'm sure you have a lot of insights from that experience. And then, secondly, we also have in common, most importantly, we have been in a relationship for over 3 years now, and I'm lucky. But I'm also lucky because
So am I.
but I get to ask you your take on Christian nationalism all the time. So I am really glad you're doing this
Thank you.
so that you can share your thoughts with more people. So
Yeah, thank you.
are you ready to
I'm
begin,
ready.
dear?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All
I'm
right.
ready.
All right.
Yeah,
Why don't you kick us off and get us started?
yeah. So, what debate are we talking about here? So, and how did that debate come about? So, in 2024, when Beckwith was running for lieutenant governor here in Indiana, um, I heard him talk about all kinds of issues. And the way he talked about them was really that it seemed like whatever he thought was good, moral, and should be state policy, that that was God's. And so I wrote this op-ed in the Indy Star, the Indianapolis Star. Micah Beckwith wants to shrink God into his own image and impose theocracy. At the same time, the Indy Star had reached out to me to discuss some comments he had made about Democrats being Jezebel and his language of demonization. And so I was interviewed a few times. And so then the Charlie Kirk murder happened, and I was interviewed there by the Indie Star as well. And I suggested to the Star to have perhaps a debate between Beckwith and myself. I thought maybe there's a possibility that we can get in a conversation. And while I'm not thinking it exactly like Charlie Kirk, but I do think that we need to have conversations. Now, I do not think that the conversations are there to impose my view on his or his view on mine, but that we have a real exchange. So that was the intent of it. I had started this Substack right after President Trump, there was the assassination attempt on President Trump. And I started the Substack because the interpretation that God had saved Trump in this attempt, while God did not save the person who died as a result of it and two other people that were injured, that really bothered me because, and it bothered many people because that is how religion often is used, where God is used to say, hey, when it's in our interest, then we say God did this, but then for other things, God doesn't do it. And so I have spent really 30 years of my life studying religion and psychology, and I'm especially an expert on distinguishing the difference between healthy and unhealthy religion. And so I'm bringing that to bear in this very important question on Christian nationalism. And so the Indy Star first told me, we're not sure whether he would agree to this. Why would he do that? But I think I think Micah Beckwith, and I don't know if he is watching right now, but I really think that he does have an interest in conversation. And so he agreed to it. And so we had this debate sponsored by the Indie Star. And it
So
was a really interesting experience.
this was your idea.
This was my idea, right? Yeah.
How can people see it? Because
Yeah.
this was recorded a few months ago. How can
Yes.
people see it?
Yeah, it was recorded in November, and it is on the Indie Star YouTube channel. It is also, you also find an article on my Substack with a link to it and a little bit explanation. So that's where you can watch it if you haven't watched it yet. And if you have watched it, I really encourage you to watch it again after this interview, because there's a lot in there that is so relevant, not just to Indiana, but what I talked about really has borne out in national politics as well. Pete Hegseth is thinking very similarly to Micah Beckwith. J.D. Vance thinks very similarly. A lot of the leaders that Trump picked are Christian nationalists, and they're having the hope that they can impose a law of God onto the country, onto people. And that is a theocracy. That brings us very close to countries like Saudi Arabia or Iran. They do it very differently, but the underlying principle of ruling in the name of God, whether you are a clergy or not, whether you're a state official and you want to impose your morality, is the same.
So you're not putting a label on our lieutenant governor that he has not claimed for himself, right?
That's
I want
true.
to be clear about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like, he has openly considered himself a Christian nationalist.
Right. Right.
And as lieutenant governor, he is the second highest ranking elected official in our state. So I'm glad you had this debate with him. You spoke about like the relevance of Christian nationalism today. Can you explain a little bit more about the definition of Christian nationalist, Christian nationalism, and how it intersects government with politics?
Yeah. So, yes, that's very important. We need to get straight what is actually Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism fuses a religious identity with state power. So that's what Christian nationalism is. It's not that a politician says, I'm a Christian and I'm going to vote according to my conscience. What Christian nationalism wants to do is it wants to dominate the state with biblical, that's what they say, with biblical moral values. And these biblical moral values are very often uh, violent. It says, do, if you don't act morally the way we think is right, what's the absolute truth, then you can be punished by the state. And so they're fusing a violent God image with the power of violence of the state. And they do that sometimes very explicitly, like, Micah Beckwith supported a firing squad for death penalty. Or, the,
if I may, he supported recently, there was a bill that was moving through the state legislature this session that would mandate the 10 Commandments being posted in every classroom in every public school. That bill has since died, but that's probably a great example of that mindset, right?
Yes, yes. And so, what Micah Beckwith said, he said that in the debate, and he also has said it in other contexts. He says, no, I'm not wanting to impose theocracy on it because I don't want the church to rule directly the state. But that's really not the definition of theocracy. Theocracy is defined that if you want to use the state to basically impose religion on people, whether that's a secular politician that does it or not. And so, and does it very restrictively. And what I want to get at today here is that really Christian nationalism is based on a reduction of religion to a very narrow view of morality. And I would love to talk about why this even exists, what they're trying to do. Because here's the thing: I think for us to really counter Christian nationalism effectively, we need to understand what the goal is, the underlying motivation, because there is a motivation underlying. Beckwith, I do not believe that Beckwith at heart has ill intentions. I really don't believe that. And sometimes people say, oh, maybe you're naive. I really think that Micah Beckwith has, on some level, good intentions. He wants, and he said this in the debate as well, that he wants people to feel that they are good, that they're able to live good, and that they have a good life, and so on. Just the way he wants to use religion to create that through a state is just so opposite to the heart even of religion. And I'm not here going to say that religion is necessary for people, because religion often has been defined as institutions telling people what to do. I don't think that people need that. I think what people are longing for is uh, something greater than themselves. They know that we all die, and that we therefore are can't just reduce ourselves to the physical world. And so there is a desire for more. I believe that this desire actually has to do with a desire for love. And that love has to do with wanting to feel like we matter absolutely. Unconditionally, though. And this is the crux of where Christian nationalism uh, touches on that desire of mattering, and it splits the world into: you matter if you do what we want, and if you don't do what we want, and we want this because we say God wants this, if you don't do that, then you are absolutely condemned. And then we can use state power to punish you in that for that.
um, which is sobering and
Yeah,
important.
right.
I pulled out a few quotes of the lieutenant governor during your exchange with him, and I do want to share because I think it gets to your point about his intention
Mm-hmm.
and how you respond to that. And if I may, and as he introduced himself, the lieutenant governor said this: "What led me into politics was when I started seeing the morality of the state beginning to crack, warping the minds of the next generation." He said he saw policies from government were not God honoring moral standards. So that's why I moved into the political world. How can I bring the gospel so people begin to walk in the moral clarity that the Bible tells us? What is your response to that? Not now,
Yeah.
and in that moment, what was your response to that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, my response, I think, if I remember correctly, I think my response was
I
that,
think your jaw dropped a little bit.
yeah. It kind of was, because it was, what I agree with is that uh, we both are looking for how can people have a good life.
Mhm.
But I had just explained in the debate, actually, how if we try to create our sense of mattering through moral effort, how that actually fails. And so the idea that you go into politics and you say, I'm going to use the power of the state to impose moral laws on people that come from my religion, that is harmful, because it really takes people's agency away. It replaces people's conscience with state law. And from where I sit, I really believe that this is completely contrary to what Jesus wanted. I believe actually that Jesus himself was killed by that kind of mentality.
Mm.
He was killed by a mentality that reduces religion, that reduces the question of God, faith in God, to moral action, and then imposing all kinds of law on people. When you read the stories of Jesus in the Hebrew in the New Testament, in the Christian scriptures, you will see that he constantly interacts with people who are actually oppressed by this kind of moralizing of religion. Um, so that's my response to that. That was my response to that at the time. Now, where I really think uh, I think we need to understand that Christian nationalism thinks that if you only followed the truth as we define it, then you will feel good
Yes.
about yourself. And then you won't have fear. Uh, the fear that actually all religions, whether it's Buddhism or whether it's Islam or whether it's any other religion, they all try to deal with helping people address the fear that comes from us knowing that we die at some point. And there are many versions of that fear. We can feel like we're going to be insignificant. We're feeling like we lost the relationship. We don't matter anymore. So those are the fears that ultimately are underlying. And when we try to counter that through our moral effort, it doesn't get better actually, because it's like as if you had a blanket that you were sleeping, you're sleeping at night and you have a blanket that's just too short. That's what the moral solution is. It never works. Because you pull it here and then you're exposed here. You pull it there, you're exposed there. It doesn't work. And now here's one of the things that I also want to say. Uh, the critics of Christian nationalism, I'm very aghast at what Christian nationalism can do. Like in Pete Hegseth's hands, Christian nationalism could blow up the whole world because people are not following what we as the United States want people to do in the name of God. But uh, what I want to emphasize here is that the moral solution, does not really address the underlying fear that motivates any searching for a higher power, any searching for more than this finite life. And it also doesn't address how we can live well together.
Oh, that's good. Um, I have had the opportunity to be at your side out and about in the world.
Uh-huh.
And folks that have watched this debate,
Yeah.
I have observed them approach you. And one of the questions I hear from them all the time is, Matthias, what surprised you about debating Micah Beckwith? What was surprising to you about that experience? So I got to ask that.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can start with when I was getting ready to do the debate. People were saying like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do this?"
Yes.
Right?
A lot of people said that.
He's not gonna really uh, have a conversation with you. And I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised how cordial the conversation was. I did feel that we respected each other. He respected me as a person. I respected him as a person. It was a very respectful conversation. And so very cordial in a way. And some people actually criticized me for that. You should have laid into him more. And I'm a trained therapist, and this is just not how I approach the world. I approach the world with looking for what is people's intention. And so I really approach this whole conversation like a therapist. I am trying to have conversations in ways that can help heal the world. And I do not believe that tearing down people helps with that. And that is, I didn't finish that thought earlier about other approaches to Christian nationalism. Um, I have a lot of criticism of Christian nationalism. I could go into my head and I could tear it down and so on, but I just don't think that helps. I think on some level, I would be doing the same thing that on some level, say Christian nationalists do. So I don't believe I don't believe that the moralistic approach will be helpful. I think most most things that you hear of people countering Christian nationalism basically say, okay, no, Jesus did not say this. Jesus said this. So Jesus said you should take care of the poor. You should take in the stranger. And then we're like wondering, why does this not work? Why do people who are wedded to the Christian nationalist ideology, why are they not listening? And so my perspective is that what this does is if you just hit back at them, the defenses just go more high. They go higher. That's what we know in therapy. That's the therapeutic institute, therapeutic intuition. We know that if a patient comes to us, if a client comes to me and says, I keep doing ABC and I don't really want to do it. And I tell them, well, just try harder. It's not going to work. If they say, I'm being mean to my kids and I can't stop it. If I tell them, like, just do ABC and just do this and that, it's probably not going to work. I need to understand, where is this coming from? Where is this? It usually feels up like pent up aggression coming from. And so my sense, Christian nationalism uh, harbors a lot of pent up aggression. And one way I think of this is, and again, I think religious stories, whether it would be the Buddha, or whether it would be Christian, or whether it would be Muslim, I really don't think it's a one religion thing. Many religions have stories that can help us explain what's going on there. And for me, a key story there is the Cain and Abel story.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the Cain and Abel story is the story where, and you can't understand this Cain and Abel story without understanding what happened between Adam and Eve, with Adam and Eve, so to speak. Now, the way I talk about this story will surprise you because it's not anything like what you usually hear. What you usually hear is that God created Adam and Eve in Genesis 2, and they had a good time in paradise. And then it goes to Genesis 3, and they hear the voice of a serpent. And usually this is even interpreted as if this was like a walking, talking serpent, which is ridiculous. Jewish people, Hebrew people never thought of it this way. They are symbolic thinkers, even back then. So we're not different from them there. And so, but to tell how it's usually told, the story is interpreted, okay, they heard the voice of the serpent, and then the woman disobeyed God and followed the serpent's voice, took the fruit, and then they became aware of themselves and were ashamed, and then God punished them. That's the story you usually hear. Now, that's not what the story actually is about. They knew that they were naked already in Genesis 2. Genesis 2:25, it says they were naked and they were not ashamed of it. They were not ashamed of it. And then in a few verses later, like a verse later really, is where the serpent enters. And now the serpent, what does the serpent mean? We are, from all the research we know, is that the serpent represents the voice of fear of nothingness. That's what it's the voice of scarcity. It's the voice of the fear of scarcity. And so you hear that by how the voice of the serpent repeats what God had said in Genesis 2. In Genesis 2, God had said you can eat from all the trees in the garden. Just from the one tree of the knowledge of good and evil, don't eat from it. In Genesis 3, the serpent repeats it and says, did God really say that you shouldn't eat from any of the trees in the garden?
He contorts it, right?
The serpent completely distorts it. And so what Eve does in that story is Eve does not say, oh yeah, God is such a bad guy. No, and I'm gonna follow the serpent. No, Eve, like, that is not what God said. Eve wants to obey. Eve wants to obey. Eve does not want to be disobedient. The whole myth of disobedience in Genesis 3 is a myth. But that is what the power of Christian nationalism is based on. That they base it on that we are sinners, and so we have no moral compass because we're sinners, and therefore we need Christian leaders that tell us how to have a moral compass, and we need to use the state to do that. So, so that's what. But what does the story actually mean? This Genesis 3 story. What it means is that Eve counters that, but in the process, this voice somehow makes her feel like a fear that she could lose this feeling that everything is good with the world. And so she starts getting trapped in this mindset of scarcity. And when we're trapped in a mindset of scarcity, then we grasp for anything. It's like as if you didn't get any air. You're like, whatever can give me air, can give me air.
And shove people out of our way,
Right,
even to get our
right,
oxygen.
and that is what happens in this grasping for the fruit. She loses sight of the good. And the way we know that is she adds a taboo and she says, we shouldn't even touch it. So she wants to be hyper obedient. She wants to be hyper moral in this story. And it's the hyper morality that is the problem of the story. And only after that do we hear, now they're naked and ashamed of it. Now they want to hide their nakedness. That's what they want to do. So that's the difference between Genesis 2 and Genesis 3. And the view of God has completely been turned around as they have it through the lens of scarcity. And that is the God you hear then speaking in Genesis 3 the rest of the time. And the God, the plentiful God, the God of abundance, every so often shines through. But what we have to do is when we read religious text, sacred text, we have to look at what happens with humans there and how are sometimes God images the ones based on their fear and how are they actually a God shines through that wants people to heal. And now going back to Cain and Abel. So in this kind of world of scarcity, this is where then in Cain and Abel, the children of Adam and Eve, so to speak. And of course, all of this is mythical language. These people never lived like that. We know that too. I know that may shock some of you when you hear that, but that is research that has been around for 150 years. But most churches don't talk about this. But anyway, so their knowledge of good and evil was not a knowledge, okay, how can we be morally good or morally bad? What the knowledge of good and evil was, how bad the world is when they don't have a ground under their feet, when they don't feel held despite being limited. The nakedness means that they're limited, that they're vulnerable. And when they try to hide that, and especially with knowledge of good and evil, when they say, okay, we know what's good and evil, morality is being used in this way as if we could use morality as a fruit and then feel better about ourselves. So when we do that, then God turns into this capricious, I bless these people and I don't bless these people. And that's what happens in Genesis 4. Cain and Abel, the story of Cain and Abel is the result of the fear that has infused their view of God. And so, again, in that story, so what we hear in this story, that supposedly God recognizes Abel's offering, right? Now, offering, by the way, offerings also started after people saw God as, okay, we need to do something. We need to give something to gain our footing back. Again, that's part of a violent God image. But within that world, one person offers something and everyone feels like that's acceptable. And then Cain offers something and Cain doesn't feel like it's recognized. Now, this is, listen carefully to this. This is at the heart of the resurgence of Christian nationalism. We all know that Trump and really all the people that he has gathered together they hold a grudge against the Christian view and really the state view also of including the least of these. And so the way Christian nationalism, with this ideology against minorities, this ideology against diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is very essential for this. They go against empathy. They make a war on empathy, right? They make
Feels
a
that way.
well, no,
Feels that way.
there's a book that's called The Sin of Empathy.
Oh,
And it argues that empathy is unchristian the way it was practiced by the Biden administration or by Christians who want to really help people that are downtrodden. So they're completely perverting the message of Jesus and the message of compassion in many other religions as well. And just what everyone knows is compassion. Atheists are compassionate. You don't need to be religious to know that compassion is important in society.
love thy neighbor.
Love thy neighbor, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's in an Asian philosophy. That's something that's there. And but I want to go back to the Cain and Abel story. So when the government is gutting diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was meant to basically finally help disadvantaged people to get on the same footing as privileged people. When that happens, then the people that are privileged, which in religious stories are often portrayed as the oldest son, like Cain, or in the prodigal son, the oldest son. These are the people that do everything right, that are morally upright, and they think they do everything right. Now, you can't really say that for some of the people in Christian nationalism, but I just want to go what the thinking is here. And then they say, okay, these people get things for free. They're recognized by God, or they're recognized by the state, and so we basically have to kill them off. So that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a Cain and Abel mentality at play in Christian nationalism that says we need to get our rightful place. Now, when that happens, though, in the Genesis 4, after Cain kills Abel, God appears again, and God on some level appeared first, trying to talk sense into Abel, into Cain, and Cain, like, okay, I'm going to make a moral effort, goes on the field, and then he's just overcome, because whenever you are trying to control the deepest feelings inside you with morality, those deepest feelings come out in perverted way, and that's when the killing happened. And that's what Christian nationalism does right now. And so I want to emphasize that there is a totally different way, but that's the danger. Christian nationalism is really lethal in its mindset. I want to point that out. And what it does is, I want to make the link back to Genesis 2. It wants people to take the fruit and through their own efforts create a kingdom of God. They will never say that explicitly. They will never admit that. They will always say, no, God, 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 God. But it's their like distorted God image that is fueled by a deep existential anxiety and fear of not mattering when someone else matters. So that's why they have to say, no, you don't matter. And so they were so appalled by the Black Lives Matter movement because they interpreted it as, oh, if they matter, then we can't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But that's not what paradise is. There's abundance. There's something for everything. That's what you see in, when we have, stories. And I know I want to let you get to your questions here, but just one more thing. The miracles in the Christian scriptures, like you can take the feeding of the 5,000, right? That's a perfect story of how Jesus shows how scarcity mentality can be overcome. So they're all there, 5,000 people. This didn't happen like physically. No physical bread, no magical multiplication of bread all of a sudden. What this is, it's like a parable, it's a story. So there is too many people that are hungry. And so Jesus asks them, well, what do you got? And they share the limited amount they have. When they share their vulnerability, then Jesus says he looks up to heaven, meaning he looks to how this limitedness is really not scarcity. But if we come together, then abundance happens.
That's
And
beautiful.
so then when we bring our vulnerability together rather than hold it against each other, when in one of the feeding of the 4,000, it was a child, interestingly, and these are like duplication stories. When But it's apropos. It kind of tells you something. When we bring what's vulnerable, like the childlike part of ourselves, and share that with each other, then we will have a wonderful world together. Yeah. So that would be the antidote to Christian nationalism. And so this is why I believe, if there are Christian nationalists listening, I'm not trying to talk against you. What I'm trying to talk about is the fears that you have. They are very real, and I believe that they're there, and the shame that is there. But it doesn't have to be through hitting other people over the head. It can be through loving each other. And it's not to shame anyone. I really don't believe in that.
You've answered a lot of my questions,
Okay.
but that was but part of what you were just talking about as you walked us through Genesis was exactly what you shared with Micah Beckwith during your conversation with him, because I think what I heard you say is you feel like the misinterpretation of Genesis is the nucleus
Yeah.
of Christian nationalism. So you shared that with
Yeah.
the lieutenant governor.
Uh-huh.
What surprised you? No, pardon me. What didn't surprise you about the way he reacted to your knowledge and your perspective? What didn't surprise you about your interaction with
Yeah.
him?
So what did not surprise me was that he reads the Bible like as a moral guidebook primarily. He reduces the Bible to morality, and that he and I think he believes that if uh, you make a moral effort, then your fruits will be given to you. And so I think that didn't surprise me. Now, what did surprise me though is how insistent he was, and I really encourage you to watch that debate.
It was moments of the
I,
spirited,
I have,
truly.
well, no, but I was shocked in how insistent he was that God was violent.
Oh, I have a quote about that. May I?
Yeah,
Can I toss it in and then I'll bounce it back
please
to
toss
you?
it in. Yeah,
Because that's what surprised me as well.
yeah,
And here are just a few things that the lieutenant governor said. Um, God is a violent God. Jesus is coming as the God of war. When justice is violated, God goes to war and violently stands up against those who would be unjust. If we choose to be unjust, the violence of God will end up destroying every single person who does that. Lastly, he said, God is good, God is loving, but he is also just. And when justice is violated, he goes to war. I was very surprised of that language. Talk about that for a
yeah,
minute.
yeah, yeah. So this was the one thing that shocked me most, and I want to because I didn't respond to that directly in the debate because I picked up on one other thing he had said, that somehow the man has to protect the woman and all that. So I went against the patriarchal God image.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
right. Uh, so but I'm glad you're bringing that question up because so this really touches on the heart of spirituality, on what religion is actually about. So what Micah Beckwith does there is he takes certain biblical verses, he pulls them out and he reads them externally, almost like instruction manuals for state policy, right? Religion and spirituality and whatever you want to call it, like higher longing, or, you don't have to be a religious person to understand what I'm going to talk about just now. Um, that is not what religion is about. Uh, what what he does is he externalizes things that are really internal, and also, and he's an example of this. But he misses the forest for the trees. That's the best metaphor I can be using here. So a lot of the verses are taken out of context. And so he had talked about how he talked about I think it was Luke 19, uh, especially verse 27, where he talks about a parable that Jesus had used of a nobleman who comes back as a king, and then there's a similar story in another gospel about the talents, right? Of you're given something, one got
Mm.
10
Mm.
pounds, one got 5 pounds, one got 1 pound, and the one with the 10 pounds made 10 pounds more, the one with the 5 made 5 pounds more, the one with 1 pound had hidden it in the ground because he was afraid that
Scarcity.
scarcity, right? Scarcity mentality. And so Jesus, at the very end of that, in Luke 19, he says that this king, when he comes back, he berates the person with the 1 pound, and then he doesn't say that he kills this person, but it has a verse in there that this king will kill the enemies. Now, this is a verse that Christian nationalists very often go to and say, "See, uh, God is violent. God will kill the enemies." Now, this is where, I wish Micah Beckwith had gone to seminary and gotten into a seminary that's not ideologically forcing you to think in a certain way, but that looks at historical critical research. Most scholars agree that Jesus told this parable as a political satire, because at that very time there was a political ruler who was doing exactly that. And so Jesus was not saying that I, as the Christ, am like that. Instead, what you see is in the next chapter, in the right after that, and Beckwith knew that. He told me that in the debate. Jesus goes to Jerusalem, but Jesus shows how he go. Jesus gives a contrast. He goes to Jerusalem not to slaughter his enemies. He goes to Jerusalem on a donkey, a lowly animal. This is the story, and shows how divine power, or the power that can help us calm our anxiety, our existential anxiety, the power that helps us feel that we matter truly, is a power that comes from below. It helps, it is with us, it stays with the people. That is what Jesus shows there. So what Christian nationalists do, they do selective literalism whenever a passage helps them be violent, instead of realizing, these religious stories are symbolic and they're trying to make points. Is a Jewish religion, Hebrew thinking is very symbolic, very playful, and they're trying to force it into like a very literalist kind of thinking. Jesus never thought that way. Uh, Now, what is religion really about? How can we interpret these kinds of stories? Now, Thomas Jefferson wanted to just throw everything out of the Bible. He actually wanted to create gospels
Mm.
that didn't have things that he thought should be in there. Right? This is a very interesting thing, right? Uh, we don't have to throw these things out of the Bible, or you don't have to throw things out of the Quran because they're being misused for violence. What we can do is, and what religion actually has done over the history of humanity is, originally, many things were understood concretely as people were also feeling physically unsafe. And then the religion and the spirituality becomes more and more internalized. It becomes more and more something symbolic internally. So there's a symbolic internalization. And so these passages, like when you hear uh, of apocalyptic stories, for instance, right? Like the whole book of Revelation, or, at the end of the Gospels, when Jesus is going to be crucified, there are many references like this about the kingdom of God and God coming back, or Jesus coming back. And a lot of this is interpreted by Christian nationalists, and unfortunately by many mainline churches. It was also because Emperor Constantine in 300 made Christianity a state religion. And that's basically what they're trying to do. They're not trying to bring Jesus back, they're trying to bring Emperor Constantine back. But what religion actually is about, what faith is about, what spirituality is about, it's very similar to poetry. It's very similar to poetry. It is that you are using, like the Psalms actually were used this way, that people would feel so oppressed and they could go into the temple and they could just rage even at God. They could give all their aggression to God and they could speak all their aggression out so that they wouldn't actually do it outside. And so when we are having these images, we can think of us, okay, if somebody in my mind keeps telling me I don't matter, I'm a nobody, I deserve to be aborted or whatever. We can go into the abortion debate here as well, but we can't right now, right? But this idea of I don't have no right to exist, we can use faith, we can use scriptures, we can use poetry, we can use even ethics, we can use all kinds of things to remind ourselves, no, that's not true. And we can, in our mind, basically kill off those voices. Now, I want to close with a story that I find very helpful in therapy. And I actually had a patient who talked about this. And that touches on the demonization question, because Michael Beckwith often has demonized people. And that's in politics often the case. And they say, like, demonized, it's like from the devil, as if it's an entity. That has nothing to do with what Jesus actually understood with demons. What he believed is that when people are dominated by other people's voices, when they're colonized in their mind, in Genesis 5, in Mark 5, 120, the so-called Gerasene demoniac, there's a person who basically lives in their mind. All other voices tell him what to do. It's like a legion. It's like an army in his head. That's what that means. And when Jesus approaches, he's like, "Oh, what do you have to do with me, Son of the Most High?" So that's like he is like pushing away against God, right? He has a fear of this moralistic God. And then he interestingly evokes God in the name of the Most High. Do not torture me. So this man has what we call in psychology an ambivalent God image. On some level, he feels that God could be something that could threaten him. On another level, he also believes that God could help him. And so what Jesus does there then is he asks him for his name. So he basically does therapy. That's what I do when I work with people who are dominated by other people's voices, so that they can find their own voice. And so these legion, these voices, it's so for the first few years, often you can just hear all other people's voices. And so we have to work through that. What happens there in this story in a moment or in a few minutes happens in therapy like over 7 years sometimes, right? Or 15 years. And so what happens then is the legion want to come out, and uh, there's a herd of swine, and uh, Jesus agrees that they can go in there. And now swine, in Hebrew thinking at the time, that's like an unclean animal. And so what happens is the unclean spirits that made the person feel ashamed of being dirty go into those swine and then run down and into the sea. That is what violence on some level means. That what keeps us small, that what keeps us feeling we don't matter internally, it makes us ashamed, that can die. It's not other people outside. We don't have to kill the people outside that do this. What we can do is we can stop giving them power inside. And that is very often something that people feel like is like a miracle, that we can't do this on our own. We are not powerful enough. That is what these verses basically mean. And so apocalyptic stories, especially, they're all about how the world that we have, the fake world, the false word inside us that makes us obey the serpent's voice, so to speak, right? The voice of nothingness, the voice of scarcity, that that needs to come crushing down so that we can find our true voice, our conscience. And the last thing, in terms of Christian nationalism, the founding fathers believed that the voice of conscience, this voice inside everyone's person, is what will set up a moral society as well. If we only uh, let reason and people's conscience do their work, our heart, right? And again, that's similar in Jeremiah 34. It's like God has written God's law, like the wisdom into our hearts. We all know how to live. When fear dominates us, then we lose sight of that. And so the state has not the role to impose anything on us. The state, in fact, the state always turns into what looks like a devil to us, whether in the Ku Klux Klan, I mentioned that here, whether in Germany, the German Christians followed that, whether in Christian nationalism right now. Really, people are robbed of the life-giving faith that could help them because it's wrapped up with state power, and that's just not good. So what I propose is that we listen to the fears that motivate people, and that we're trying to help people find ways to address the fear of not mattering without vilifying others outside, without doing the Cain and Abel business, and without demonizing each other. And then we will have a good society in which we can share. So that's my hope.
And you conveyed that to our lieutenant governor, and I'm very thankful you offered to have a conversation with him, which again was a very interesting exchange. But I think you taught me and others that the interpretation of the Bible and the imposition of religion into government, as he states so matter-of-factly, and so peppered with fast and furiously with gospel, that is very hurtful, is very disorienting, and it's hard to understand how to respond to that. And I think that's what you demonstrated to Hoosiers. There is a response to this, and it is in a therapeutic style. It's with a compassionate heart, and it's with listening. But I am very grateful that with strength, you got your point across as you did today and shared with us.
Thank you. Yeah. And I want to emphasize, we can counter unhealthy faith with healthy faith.
Yes.
And that healthy faith is not just do good and be moral, because that's too short, as I said. It's like really connecting with the hearts of each other. Now, I I really wish that I could debate, others like this. I would love to debate Pete Hegseth or
I'm here
JD
for
Vance,
that.
right? Or others, or I would like to give talks. I would like to really engage others or come into congregations or speak so that I can talk about this because again I want to say that I think there is something to having real conversations and touching on the very difficult
Mhm.
questions. And I invite you, I'm doing this on my Substack here, so I want to thank you for joining me today in this live video. This is the first of many. Share the word, subscribe if you haven't. If you're able to support me financially in doing this work, because I'm trying to really expand this, I invite you to become a paid subscriber. Also, you can also find me on TikTok under Healthy Faith and a Peaceful Life. I will every once in a while give inspirations there
Yep.
as well. So again, thank you for joining me, and thank you so much, Jocelyn, for
Thank you.
uh, interviewing me.
We're a good
That's a
team. This is great.
we're a great team. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.